Another young Sheldon character confirmed to be returning in upcoming Georgie and Mandy episode. When young Sheldon wrapped its 7-season run, fans knew it wasn't the end of the Cooper family. CBS quickly greenlit a spin-off centered on Georgie and Mandy, chronicling their lives as young parents navigating marriage, family obligations, and unexpected adulthood in Texas. While the new series has worked hard to carve out its own identity, its strongest pull has been the connections to young Sheldon. The latest surprise? Another familiar face from the original show has been confirmed to return in an upcoming episode, sparking a wave of nostalgia and excitement for longtime fans. This revelation comes at a perfect time for Georgie and Mandy's first marriage, which has been steadily balancing new storylines with callbacks to the beloved young Sheldon universe. While Missy, Connie, Mima, and Sheldon's voiceover have already anchored the show in familiar territory, this newest confirmed return solidifies that the spin-off isn't leaving its roots behind anytime soon. So, who's coming back, and what does it mean for Georgie and Mandy's story? Let's dive into the details, the context, and the potential ripple effects of this major character return. The returning character, Pastor Jeff Difford. That's right, Pastor Jeff Matt Hobby, the quirky, well-meaning, and often unintentionally hilarious leader of the Medford Baptist Church, is confirmed to make his comeback in an upcoming Georgie and Mandy episode. For years on Young Sheldon, Pastor Jeff was both comic relief and a gentle moral compass. His interactions with Sheldon often ended in theological sparring matches that left him sweating, while his mentorship of Georgie had a more subtle but meaningful influence. After all, Georgie spent much of his youth torn between rebellion and obligation, and Pastor Jeff was often caught in the middle of Connie's free-spirited worldview and Mary Cooper's strict religiosity. Now that Georgie is an adult with a wife and baby of his own, the return of Pastor Jeff couldn't come at a more interesting time. He's no longer the awkward teenager being dragged to Sunday service. He's the father who might have to decide whether to raise his child within the same church community that shaped his own complicated upbringing. Why Pastor Jeff's return matters. The inclusion of Pastor Jeff is more than just a fun cameo. It serves three major functions for the spin-off. 1. Revisiting Georgie's past. Pastor Jeff represents Georgie's adolescence, the awkward years where he was overshadowed by Sheldon, dismissed by his teachers, and pressured to live up to Mary's faith-driven expectations. Georgie wasn't always the most church-inclined of the Cooper kids, but Pastor Jeff saw more potential in him than Georgie often realized. Bringing Jeff back opens the door for heartfelt reflection on how much Georgie has grown, and how far he's come since the days when Mary constantly prayed for his wayward soul. 2. Raising parenting questions. Mandy and Georgie are still figuring out their parenting style. They've already clashed over finances, career aspirations, and family boundaries, but religion hasn't yet taken center stage. Pastor Jeff's return provides the perfect catalyst. Does Georgie want to raise CC in the church? Will Mandy resist, given her independent streak? And how will Mima, whose views often ran counter to Mary's traditional faith, weigh in? These questions strike at the heart of what makes parenting so complex and relatable for audiences. 3. Tying back to Mary Cooper. Pastor Jeff's reappearance also subtly keeps Mary Cooper present in the narrative. While Zoe Perry isn't a series regular in the spin-off, Mary's influence remains enormous. She was always Pastor Jeff's staunchest supporter, often recruiting him into family crises and leaning on him as a religious authority. His return inevitably echoes Mary's role, reminding both Georgie and the audience that her impact still shapes their decisions, even when she's not physically there. The episode setup. What we know so far. CBS hasn't released a full synopsis yet, but insider reports suggest that Pastor Jeff's return will be part of a storyline where Georgie and Mandy must make a choice about CC's future, specifically whether or not to have her baptized. The idea reportedly comes from Mary, who pressures Georgie with phone calls and gentle reminders about family tradition. Mandy, meanwhile, is hesitant. She grew up in a very different household and isn't keen on letting church obligations dictate her daughter's upbringing. When Pastor Jeff appears, it's at Mary's request, but he soon finds himself caught in a debate between Georgie and Mandy that's far from simple. Rather than being a heavy-handed plot, the episode is said to balance humor and heart. Pastor Jeff's fumbling attempts to sell the idea of baptism reportedly lead to some of the season's funniest moments, particularly when Mima decides to step in and educate him about free thinking. At the same time, the storyline gives Georgie a rare chance to be the voice of reason as he navigates between his wife's independence, his mother's expectations, and his pastor's persuasion. Fan reaction, nostalgia, and excitement. Since the news broke, fans online have been buzzing with theories. Some are eager to see Pastor Jeff reconnect with Mima, given their long history of clashing philosophies. Others are curious whether Sheldon's voiceover will make a sly remark about the pastor, as adult Sheldon often poked fun at his childhood theological debates. Most importantly, longtime young Sheldon viewers see Pastor Jeff's return as proof that the spin-off isn't abandoning its roots. For all its freshness, Georgie and Mandy's first marriage thrives when it reminds audiences of the world they fell in love with in the first place. Just as Missy's presence grounds the series, Pastor Jeff's cameo helps keep the Medford community alive. Expanding the Georgie and Mandy universe, the spin-off is still in its first season, but its approach to blending new stories with old faces has been clear. Georgie and Mandy are at the center, but the show is slowly reintroducing supporting characters from young Sheldon in ways that feel organic. Missy and Connie were essential from the start. Sheldon remains a presence through narration. Now Pastor Jeff joins the mix, and fans are already speculating about who might return next. Tam Ungwain, Sheldon's childhood friend, could easily reappear, maybe as a young adult reconnecting with Missy. Billy Sparks, a grown-up Billy, could still be living in Medford, ready to provide comic relief. Brenda Sparks, with her ties to George Sr. and Mary, she remains a strong candidate for a return. Dr. Sturgis, Mima's eccentric ex-boyfriend, could pop back in for a reunion. Pastor Jeff's re-entry proves that the show isn't afraid to dip back into its character well, and if handled carefully, it could become one of its most powerful tools for growth. The bigger picture, faith, family, and growth. Beyond the laughs and nostalgia, the decision to bring back Pastor Jeff fits neatly into the spin-off's larger themes. Georgie and Mandy's first marriage is a story about growing up too soon, about learning to balance responsibility with individuality, and about building a family in the shadow of one's past. Faith and community are natural extensions of those struggles. Georgie spent much of his youth feeling underestimated, especially in comparison to Sheldon. Now he's learning what it means to be taken seriously as a husband, a father, and perhaps even as a man of faith in his own right. Mandy, meanwhile, challenges the traditional expectations that defined much of Mary's parenting. Together, their dynamic is fertile ground for exploring how couples reconcile differences while raising a child. Pastor Jeff's reappearance is the perfect narrative spark to highlight those struggles. His role may be comic at first, but his presence forces Georgie and Mandy to articulate what they truly believe about family, tradition, and the future they want for their daughter. Conclusion: a welcome homecoming. In the end, the return of Pastor Jeff is more than just a fun Easter egg for fans. It's a homecoming that deepens the Georgie and Mandy spinoff. By weaving him back into the story, the series connects past and present, reminding viewers that while Georgie and Mandy are building something new, they're still deeply tied to the world young Sheldon created. The upcoming episode promises humor, heart, and a fair bit of awkward church banter, exactly the kind of mix that made